She was dying. He brought Mistress to hospital for divorce. What happened next will shock you. The sound of Victoria's laughter echoed through the hospital room like shattering glass. Emma Rodriguez lay in the hospital bed, her head wrapped in bandages, a dark bruise spreading across her cheekbone. 3 days ago, she'd fallen down the stairs of their apartment building, or had she been pushed? The memory was fuzzy, lost in the haze of pain medication, but the scene unfolding before her was crystal clear. Marcus, her husband of 5 years, stood at the foot of her bed in his expensive Italian suit, his arm wrapped possessively around Victoria, his secretary, his mistress, his future. Victoria wore a blood-red dress that probably cost more than Emma earned in a month at the small bookstore where she worked. "Just sign the papers, Emma," Marcus said, his voice cold and businesslike, as if he were closing a corporate deal rather than ending a marriage. "We both know this is over." "I'm in the hospital," Emma whispered, her throat tight. "I could have died." Victoria rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, please, you fell down some stairs. Stop being so melodramatic. Marcus has wasted 5 years of his life on you. The least you can do is let him go gracefully." The elderly lawyer in the corner, Mr. Whitmore, shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. He'd been Marcus's family attorney for years. Old money, old connections. Emma's hands trembled as she stared at the divorce papers. Victoria had thrust into her lap. The header read, "Petition for divorce, irreconcilable differences." "Your father left you nothing but debts," Marcus continued, his handsome face twisted with contempt. "Chen Industries collapsed before he died. I've been supporting us while you played at your little hobby job. Victoria's family has real money, real connections. She's what I need to move forward in life." Victoria preened, her perfectly manicured fingers clutching Marcus's arm. "We're getting married next month in Santorini. Exclusive venue, 300 guests. People who matter." She smirked at Emma. "Sorry, you won't make the guest list." Emma closed her eyes, remembering her father's funeral 6 months ago. Robert Chen had been a quiet man, a factory owner who'd lived modestly in a small house, drove an old Toyota, and spent his evenings reading philosophy books. The funeral had been small, just Emma, a handful of his old employees, and Marcus, who'd spent the entire service on his phone. What Marcus didn't know, what nobody knew except Emma and her father's mysterious lawyer, Mrs. Patricia Hayes, was the phone call Emma had received 2 days before her accident. "Ms. Rodriguez, this is Patricia Hayes. I was your father's private attorney. I need you to come to my office immediately. It's about your father's will. There are complications you need to understand before they become public." Emma had planned to go that very afternoon, but then she'd been found unconscious at the bottom of the stairs, and the appointment had been rescheduled for today, for this exact hour, in fact. "Sign it," Marcus demanded, his voice hardening, "or I'll make sure you walk away with nothing. My lawyers will bury you." Victoria thrust a pen into Emma's hand, her eyes gleaming with malicious victory. "He's mine now. He always should have been. You were just a phase, a mistake he made in college before he knew better." Something snapped inside Emma. Not her spirit, that had been broken weeks ago. What snapped was the last thread of hope that the man she'd loved, the man she'd worked 2 jobs to put through business school, might have some shred of decency left. She took the pen. "Smart girl," Victoria cooed, finally accepting reality. Emma signed every page, her handwriting surprisingly steady. When she finished, she looked up at Marcus with eyes that were dry and cold. "You're going to regret this." Marcus laughed, actually laughed. "Regret leaving a broke bookseller for an heiress?" "I don't think so, Emma. Enjoy your poverty. Try not to come begging when you can't make rent." They swept out of the room in a cloud of expensive perfume and cologne, Victoria's giggles fading down the hallway. Mr. Whitmore paused at the door, looking back at Emma with something that might have been pity, then followed his clients. Emma waited until their footsteps disappeared. Then she reached for her phone and dialed the number from memory. "Mrs. Hayes? This is Emma Rodriguez. I'm ready for that meeting now." Mrs. Patricia Hayes's office was nothing like Emma expected. It wasn't in a glass, Tower downtown, but in a converted brownstone in the old district. The kind of place where real power resided. Quiet, understated, and absolutely unshakable. The walls were lined with legal books that looked centuries old, and the furniture was antique mahogany that spoke of old money and older secrets. Mrs. Hayes herself was a striking woman in her 60s, with silver hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. She rose when Emma entered, still moving carefully because of her injuries. "Ms. Rodriguez," she said warmly, but her eyes narrowed as she took in the bandages and bruises. "Did he do this to you?" I don't remember," Emma admitted. "I was at the top of the stairs. We'd been arguing about money, and then I was waking up in the hospital." Mrs. Hayes's mouth formed a thin line, but she gestured to a chair. "We'll address that later. First, there's something you need to understand about your father." She opened a folder on her desk, and Emma saw photographs, her father, but younger, standing in front of factories, shaking hands with men in expensive suits, cutting ribbons at grand openings. "Your father was a very private man," Mrs. Hayes began. "After your mother died when you were 10, he became even more reclusive. He didn't want his wealth to change you, to rob you of a normal life. He wanted you to understand the value of hard work, of real relationships built on character rather than money." Emma frowned. "Wealth? My father lived in a modest house, drove an old car." "A carefully constructed fiction," Mrs. Hayes interrupted gently. "Robert Chen wasn't just a factory owner, Ms. Rodriguez. He was a genius investor. When he sold Chen Industries 15 years ago, he walked away with $340 million. He took that money and invested it brilliantly. Tech startups before anyone understood their potential, pharmaceutical companies, real estate across 3 continents, rare earth minerals." She pushed a document across the desk. Emma's vision blurred as she read the number. 8,700,000, $8.7 billion, Mrs. Hayes confirmed. "Your father was one of the 50 wealthiest people in the country. And as his sole heir, Ms. Rodriguez, it all belongs to you now." The room spun. Emma gripped the arms of her chair, certain she was hallucinating from the pain medication. "That's not possible," she whispered. "It's very possible. Your father's will stipulated that you would receive nothing until you turned 30, which you did last month, or until his death, whichever came first. He wanted you to build your own life, to know who you were without the burden of wealth. He wanted you to know who truly valued you." Mrs. Hayes paused. "I assume your husband knew nothing of this." Emma thought of Marcus, of the way he'd sneered at her dead-end job, of how he'd complained about her father's failure to leave them an inheritance. "No," she said softly. "I didn't even know." "Good." Mrs. Hayes pulled out another document. "Because there's more. Do you know what Nexus Pharmaceuticals is?" The name hit Emma like a physical blow. "That's where Marcus works. He's the VP of marketing. He's obsessed with that company. Works 16-hour days, travels constantly. He says it's the future of medicine." "It is quite innovative," Mrs. Hayes agreed, "which is why your father bought it." 3 months before he died, Robert Chen acquired 67% controlling interest in Nexus Pharmaceuticals for $1.2 billion. He was planning to take an active role in the company before his cancer returned. Emma couldn't breathe. "I own Marcus's company?" "You own Marcus's company," Mrs. Hayes confirmed with the faintest smile. "You are effectively his boss. The board has been waiting to meet you. They don't know about your personal situation, and they don't need to. But as majority shareholder, you have the power to make any personnel decisions you deem necessary." Emma's mind raced, thinking of all the nights Marcus had come home late, all the business dinners with Victoria, all the times he'd made her feel small and worthless because she didn't understand his important career. "When can I meet the board?" she asked quietly. Mrs. Hayes' smile widened. "How about Monday? That gives you the weekend to review these files. I think you'll find them very enlightening." The executive boardroom of Nexus Pharmaceuticals was everything Marcus had ever dreamed of, and he was about to lose it all. He walked in at 8 a.m. sharp on Monday, Victoria by his side. They'd just returned from a weekend at her parents' estate, planning their extravagant wedding. Life was perfect. His assistant, Jennifer, looked pale. "Mr. Rodriguez, you have an emergency board meeting. Conference room A immediately." "I wasn't informed of any meeting," he said irritably. "It came from the new owner. Apparently old Mr. Chen's heir has arrived." Marcus straightened his tie. This was good, a chance to impress the new boss, whoever they were. He'd been positioning himself for a C-suite role for months. Conference room A occupied the entire top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The 5 board members sat along one side of the massive table, and at the head of the table, backlit by the morning sun, sat a woman in an impeccable black power suit. "Emma." Marcus actually stumbled, his Italian loafers catching on the carpet. "What the hell?" "Sit down, Mr. Rodriguez," Emma said, her voice carrying an authority he'd never heard before. "This won't take long." "This is insane," he sputtered. "You can't be here. You're a bookseller." "I'm the majority shareholder of this company," Emma corrected calmly. "I own 67% of Nexus Pharmaceuticals, which makes me your employer." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit." He sat, his mind reeling. This had to be a joke, some kind of elaborate prank. Emma opened a folder. "Gentlemen, I've spent the weekend reviewing our VP of Marketing's performance over the past 3 years. The results are troubling." She looked directly at Marcus. "Your last campaign for Xenoprin cost this company $4.2 million, generated a 2% increase in prescriptions. Industry standard is 15-20%. One of the board members, Dr. Patel, nodded grimly. "We've been concerned about marketing's ROI for some time. Your department's efficiency has declined 34% since you took over." Emma continued, sliding documents across the table. "But what's really interesting is your expense reports." Marcus felt sweat forming on his upper lip. $47,000 in business dinners last year alone. With the same person, your secretary, Victoria. Emma's eyes were ice cold. "Who you married 2 days ago, correct?" "Those were legitimate team-building retreats at 5-star resorts, hotel suites charged to the company card, couples massages listed as executive wellness." Emma's voice never rose, but each word landed like a hammer. "You've been embezzling from this company, Mr. Rodriguez, stealing from the people who trusted you. This is revenge." Marcus exploded, standing so fast his chair toppled backward. "You're angry about the divorce. This is abuse of power." "No," Emma said quietly. "This is justice. You stole from this company. You performed poorly in your role. You violated corporate ethics policies. Any CEO would fire you." She stood, and somehow, she seemed taller than him, stronger than him. "But yes, there's a certain satisfaction in being the one who gets to do it." She nodded to the security guards at the door. "Mr. Marcus Rodriguez, you're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you to collect your personal items. You have 30 minutes. "You can't do this." But even as he protested, the guards were moving toward him. "Oh, and Marcus?" Emma's voice stopped him at the door. "Victoria was fired on Friday. Apparently she was also submitting false expense reports. I'm sure you two will have lots of time together now." His face went white. "We have nothing. The wedding, the deposits. Should have thought of that before you. Stole from your employer and divorced. A woman worth billions." Emma turned back to the board members. "Now, gentlemen, let's discuss restructuring the marketing department." The last thing Marcus saw before security let him out was Emma, his ex-wife, the woman he'd mocked and belittled and thrown away, sitting at the head of the table like she'd been born to it, because she had been. Epilogue. 5 years later. Emma stood on the stage of the Global Health Summit, accepting the Humanitarian of the Year award. The Chen Foundation had just announced a $500 million initiative to provide free medication to underserved communities worldwide. In the audience, she spotted a familiar face, Marcus, now working as a regional sales manager for a mid-tier pharmaceutical company. He'd tried to sue her for wrongful termination, but the evidence of his embezzlement had been overwhelming. He'd settled out of court quietly, brokenly. Victoria had left him within a year, when the money ran out and reality set in. Emma didn't feel triumphant anymore when she saw him. She felt nothing at all. He was just a man who'd made bad choices, a cautionary tale she sometimes shared in business school lectures. After the ceremony, she stood alone for a moment, looking at a photograph she always carried, her father, Robert Chen, at her college graduation, beaming with quiet pride. "I understand now, Dad," she whispered. "Why you waited? Why you let me learn the hard way?" Because Emma had learned the most valuable lesson her father could have taught her. That character reveals itself not in comfort but in crisis, that people show you who they really are when they think you have nothing to offer them. And she'd learned that the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming everything they said you could never be. Emma Chen, CEO, philanthropist, billionaire, had been forged in the fire of betrayal and risen from the ashes stronger than anyone, including herself, had ever imagined possible. The girl who signed divorce papers in a hospital bed was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who'd turned her greatest loss into her greatest strength. And that, she thought as she looked out at the glittering crowd, was worth more than all the billions in the world.